Hey everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and today I'm doing another interview. My guest today is a main writer on The Next Step. They've written quite a few seasons, and today they're going to come on and tell us more about the storylines and more about themselves.
Hi, I'm Rachael SCHAEFER, and I am one of the showrunners, writer, and executive producer on The Next Step.
Thank you so much for coming, Rachael. So today I've got some questions based on your writing and producing career. And my first question for you is, when did you first get into the writing and producing world?
So, well, there's two parts to that question. So, I always wanted to be a writer. And I started out being a producer's assistant and moved into development at a production company. And from there, I took the leap of faith to just write and try and get an agent. So the first show I wrote on was a show called Wingin' It, which was like a half-hour tween comedy. And from there, the creator of that show was working on another show called The Next Step. And I moved to The Next Step and started writing for that and moved up the ranks. And as you move up the ranks, you start doing more producer, creative producer duties as well. So that's kind of how I got into the producing side.
Fantastic, and it sounds like you've had an amazing journey so far. And obviously you mentioned The Next Step, and I was just wondering, what was your favorite storyline to write for The Next Step, if you can pick?
Oh my goodness, there's so many. Oh gosh. I'll tell you, there's one scene that really sticks out for me. In season 3, a little insider knowledge is we knew that we were going to start transitioning cast. So we wrote a lot of the characters knowing that this would kind of be their goodbyes and start hinting at their goodbyes. And so there's a scene with James and Riley. I think it's before she goes on stage, and it's a mirror of the water bottle scene from episode 3 in the first season. So for me, that was just a personal favorite because I had worked on the first scene they ever did together, which turned out very well. And so it was nice to kind of bring that back to kind of close out their story. Now in season 4, it ended up taking a turn and they were still a couple. But initially we were kind of starting to phase out characters. And so that was kind of going to be a nice like close bookend to their story.
Yeah, definitely, and I think like the mountain spring water, that's it, is just kind of just, it's such... I think Jiley kind of are that now. Like, if you go and buy a bottle, you can always think of them. So, obviously, you've been in the writing world for a really long time. And do you have any advice to people who want to get into it?
Yeah, I mean, well, writing is the biggest thing. You have to have material. You have to have ideas. I wouldn't limit yourself to... like, I want to be this kind of writer, so I'm not going to do this other job, because you never know what a job will lead to. I started out as a producer's assistant, which felt not close. Didn't feel close to what I wanted to do. But I met my agent in that job, and that's how I got my agent for writing, which led to writing. So you never know what opportunities will come, where opportunities will come from. So just be open to everything, and then have samples ready for when you do meet that person. You're like, oh, I've got this prepared.
Yeah, definitely. That is some great advice, and I think lots of people will definitely be able to relate to it. So my next question is, in 2015, you wrote an episode for the TV series Make It Pop. What was that like?
Well, it was interesting because I wasn't in the writer's room for Make It Pop. So like in a writer's room, you have a bunch of writers and they sit around and they discuss ideas and what they want to do with the season and all that kind of stuff. And then you sometimes have writers you hire from the outside. And maybe because the writing staff doesn't have time to write all the episodes or whatever the case may be, they hire outside writers to write episodes. So I was hired to write an episode So I wasn't part of the staff, and they basically gave me like what they call a beat sheet, which is just like all the story plot points, and then you have to make it into a script. And so that's what I did. Basically, I kind of just was in my own little world at home writing.
Yeah, well, that sounds lovely, and it sounds like obviously because you were on the Next Step. How many? I think you did every season on the Next Step. Am I right? Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't do season 4. That was the only one I didn't do. Yeah.
Yeah, and was it kind of weird being away from the Next Step, writing something else?
No, it's kind of nice because you feel like I love the Next Step, and I love creating for that show, but it's also nice to exercise different muscles and write for different characters with different stories. So it's fun. I like it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So, have you always wanted to be a writer?
Yes, I have always wanted to be a writer. From when I was little, I used to write short stories, and I remember in 3rd grade, we used to get like these little notebook things, and you're supposed to journal in them, and I would just always write up make-believe stories instead of journaling. So yeah, I've always wanted to.
And that's fantastic that you've always wanted to do it. And I think, obviously, it's great getting into things like later on, but if you've always wanted to do it, it's always lovely because you always have that goal. And you get lots of experience too, so I think it's really great. And obviously, earlier on, we were talking about your favourite storyline and scene from the Next Step. But I think this question might be a little bit easier, maybe. What was your favourite season to write on the Next Step?
I love season 6 and 7. So I came on board as showrunner on season 5 with Karen McClellan. And as a showrunner, you really you're in charge of the stories. And so there's a certain, it's kind of fun. Like all the stories we came up with, we got to see through. So so season 6 and 7, I think we hit our stride, and we really we figured it out and enjoyed that. Yeah, I enjoyed those seasons.
Yeah, these were great seasons. And then obviously in season 7 we had the Dance Mania twist. So what was it kind of like? Because Dance Mania was so different to regionals, nationals, internationals. So what was it like writing Dance Mania?
Oh, it was so fun. It was so fun. The network had come to us and was like, can you guys just find a new twist for this season, like a way to spice it up, make it feel a little bit more unpredictable. And so that was our solution. And it was so cool to see the set come to life. So we mostly work in a studio, and we have our sets there, Studio A, Studio B, or I guess it's Studio 1, and the coffee shop, whatever the name happens to be. But when we go to competition, we're either on location, which we normally are in a theater, but for the reality show, we got to be in this big studio. They built the whole thing from scratch, and it was so cool to see it come to life, something we wrote, and then they made it just look that much better and that much bigger, and yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, it does sound awesome. And you were mentioning about the cafe, and I was wondering, where do you get the names from for the cafe each season?
Usually it always comes from the writer's room, and it's usually when we're like, we're stuck on a story beat or something. We're like, you know what? Let's just pitch out on ideas for the name of the coffee shop this season. It's always kind of just a thing to get the brain flowing and get out of a rut. And I personally have never named the coffee shop. I am not that punny or clever, but the writers come up with some really good ones.
Yeah, my favourite one was Shakes and Ladders. I thought it was very creative, that one.
Yeah. I forget who came up with that one. Anyway.
Yeah, that one was a good one. So I was also wondering, where did you come up with the idea of TNS East and TNS West? Because obviously that was a huge plot twist.
Yeah, so when I was brought on to showrun, I felt like a problem with season 4 was that it was in this middle ground. You still had the old cast and stories about the old cast, and this new cast which wasn't being fully utilized, and they had one in season 3 they had won internationals, and I think what made the next step great and why you rooted for them is that they were the underdog. And I felt like, how do you make the next step the underdog again? How do you make it that they have an uphill battle? And for me, the solution was, you split them in two, and it becomes a bit of a civil war. And Michelle kind of by default becomes the underdog. Like, she started this own team. She's kind of got to cobble people together. And so you're naturally rooting for them again. So that was kind of the solution to that.
Yeah, that's always interesting to find out kind of the things behind the storylines. And did you prefer TNS East or West, if you want to say?
I liked them for different reasons, you know. I find Emily hilarious. I love writing for Emily. She's just so, you know, she says what's on her mind without apologies. But, you know, Michelle's just all heart. So, yeah, you got to root for that too.
Yeah, definitely. When they came together, it was always good. And I think stand-up in season 5 was a really good routine, because obviously they merged and things, so that was good. So my next question is, do you have any storylines you want to do if there is a season 8? I don't know if you're allowed to share anything.
I mean, Karen and I have brainstormed some stuff, but there's nothing specific at this point. Yeah, that I can, yeah.
Yeah, I heard you've been brainstorming, and that's it. So yeah, we'll have to see. Fingers crossed we'll have there'll be many plot twists coming up if there's a new one. There always is. What has been the best moment in your career so far?
The best moment? Oh gosh. Well, okay. I think one thing that's awesome is, you know, we make the show, and I never really get interaction with fans. I don't really, I guess I don't see the response. So I don't know how the show goes over with people. And I think in season 2 or 3, I met someone in a meeting, and he was like, "You work on The Next Step. My daughter loves that show." And I was like, I can probably get some of the cast to like video a hello to your daughter. And so I did that, and I sent it off to him, and he filmed his daughter's response, and she was over the moon. She was so excited. And that was the first time I really saw a fan response, and it felt so amazing. Like, it felt so cool to see the stuff that like I'm writing and creating impacts people and excites them. So that was a pretty big high.
Yeah, that does sound lovely. And yeah, I mean, obviously, I have like a fan page for it, so I get to see like what the fans think all the time. But it must have been really nice for you to kind of see someone's reaction.
Yeah, it was really neat.
Yeah, definitely. And then now there's like these reaction videos on it, YouTube. So yeah, that'll be interesting. So I have one more question for you, and it is, do you have any stories from The Next Step that you want to share, like behind the scenes stuff?
Behind the scenes.
I expect you've got many from the amount of years you've been on there.
I know, I'm trying to think of ones that are like fun or I mean, we're also like, it's such a well-oiled machine now that it like, there's not too many like crazy things or, I do remember when we first started, before we had edit anything, it was like, is this gonna work? Like, are we gonna, you know, like, is this show gonna be good? Like, we don't know. And then I think it was Eldon who had his first solo, and it was just so good, and we were like, oh, this is gonna work. This is gonna work. And I'm trying to think of another. The first Talking Heads I ever did. So I would sit in the chair and ask questions. And so the first person I did was Lamar, who plays West. And I was asking all these questions, and we have film sets have something called an AD, an assistant director, and their job is to keep things running smoothly and on time. And what they'll do is they'll look at the writing in a scene and say like, oh, well, this scene will take like an hour to film. And they kind of schedule the day based on what they think, how long a scene will take. And so they had allotted a certain amount of time for the questions at the end of the day, but we'd never done anything like this before. So I was asking questions to West. And when we finished, the AD came up and he's like, I didn't schedule for this. I don't know how am I supposed to schedule this? These are all new questions. They're not scripted. And so it was kind of part of the learning curve of making this show, because it wasn't like anything that had ever been done before. So we've fine-tuned it now. Now we're like pretty good at figuring out how long questions are going to take. But it was an experiment in the beginning.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously the talking heads are quite unique to the next step, I think. Obviously, like, Lost and Found did it as well, but it's something definitely unique for the show, because it's kind of a narration, isn't it, over the top of the storylines.
Yeah, and I think it gives nice insight into how people are feeling or what their motivations are, and it really forces, from a writer perspective, it really forces writers to think about character. Like, why are they doing what they're doing? Because they're going to have to verbalize that. So you have to know why people are doing the things that they do, what their motivations are.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree. And it's been amazing finding out more about yourself today, and especially the storylines. It's great finding out the reasoning behind them. So thank you so much for sharing everything, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You're most welcome, and also thank you to everybody who watched this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next week for another interview. Bye, guys.
Bye.